Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's about the midpoint of the year. I was reminded about that from Brock yesterday over at the Active Mind, who did a tag relating to the fact that it's the middle of the year and it's a good idea to kind of look back over the previous months of reading and just kind of evaluate what that reading year has been like, what the ups were and the downs were, what was surprises, some disappointments, things like that. It was a great video. I'll link it below so you can check it out, but I kind of wanted to do my own. Now, there's a tag component to this, and I wanted to do my own questions, though. So I have 5 questions here, and I'd like to encourage anyone who's watching at home to play along at home if you wanted to, or if you have your own booktube channel, you could make a video off of these 5 questions. It's not a formal tag or anything like that, and a lot of these questions overlap with the initial tag. I think that initial tag was called something like mid-year freak out or something like that. I don't know, but these are my questions. These are 5 questions that I think would make for good reflection on a year in reading so far. So the first one is, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. I wanted to continue the book giveaway. So let's see. I have 2 paperbacks here. The first one is Catch-22. And the nice thing about this edition of the Catch-22 is that it doesn't have those stupid stickers on it promoting the fact that I think this was turned into a Hulu show or something like that at some point. The only downside is the person who owned this before highlighted some of the names in the book, it looks like, but only for like the first couple pages. So but there are a few underlines in this book, but overall it's completely readable. So that's available, and then we've got Nikolai Gogol's Dead Souls. This is the Pevyar and Volkanovsky translation. So if you're interested in either of these, you feel free to email me. You just have to live in the United States, the lower 48 specifically, unfortunately, but you have to live in the lower 48, and you just have to email me, christopherrussellreads@gmail.com, and express interest, and it's first come, first serve. So if you get there first, it's yours. Okay, so let's get into the questions. The first question relates to time, since we are marking this occasion by the time of the year in which it falls. The first question is, what books have you changed your opinion on? Now, I only put 1 in this category. I could put a bunch in this category, but I decided to put the one that's been first and foremost on my mind, The History of the Russian Revolution by Leon Trotsky, as a book that I've changed my opinion on as time has gone on. And what I mean by that is I read it, I dumped many cartons of flags in it, I was having a decent enough time with it, but there were times when I was overwhelmed by it, there were times when I thought it was a bit of a slog to read through, and undoubtedly if I read it cover to cover again, I would probably think the same thing. But the things that were great in this book have not left me since I read it a couple of months ago. And I was just thinking about it the other day, and I can't get certain scenes of this out of my mind. And there are many, many books on the Russian Revolution. It's not like it's a topic that no one has spilt any ink over. But all of the books that I've read about the Russian Revolution and want to continue to read about the Russian Revolution are more modern histories on the event. And those are fascinating and ultimately are a little bit more helpful than I think this is. For example, Trotsky's use of statistics in this book is almost entirely useless to me. There's no real sourcing of it. It's hard to tell where these numbers are coming from, all sorts of things. But what all of those lack, though, is the energy and the enthusiasm of somebody who is actually there, and Trotsky was there. And, you know, interestingly enough, he doesn't actually use the first person in this book. When he refers to himself, he refers to himself in the third person, because he is trying to write an objective history or whatever. But nevertheless, you can tell when you're reading this that this is from somebody who was there. This is from somebody who is intimately aware of these events, who is living these events on a day-by-day basis, and is experiencing the ups and the downs of this entire experience. And when it gets to a certain crescendo at the end of the book, it is fascinating. And it's not even a crescendo at the end of the book. There are moments punctuated throughout, particularly when the army turns on the Tsar, because there are essentially 2 revolutions in Russia that make up the Russian Revolution. And the first one, which is captured in the first volume of this is broken down into 3 volumes, by the way, which is why it's so big. But the first volume in particular, talking about that first revolution, I thought was fascinating. And then the second volume sort of grappling with that intermediate period before the first and the second revolution. And then the third volume going into that third revolution and what all of that meant. I just thought it was fascinating. Again, there were moments when I wasn't enjoying the reading experience, but the reason I've changed my opinion on it is that as I've gotten distance from it, I've realized just how great those great moments were, and I'm absolutely grateful that I stuck it out through some of those moments which were a little bit slower. So it's not like I'm giving this a full-throated recommendation, because there are, I'm sure, people out there who would find this to be, as dry could get. But for me, I thought it was great, and I wouldn't recommend it as your first book on the Russian Revolution either. But at some point, if you're interested in the Russian Revolution and you haven't given this a shot, and maybe you've read other things about the Russian Revolution, I think you're in prime, perfect position to pick this up and give it a shot. And I don't think ultimately you'll be disappointed, because there are certain things in this book that I think will just stick with you. I just think it's hard not to, considering the fact that this is written from the perspective of somebody who is actually there. So, there you go. Number 2 is, what are the biggest surprises of the year? The first one, and these are in no particular order, the first one is this one. I talked about it last month, but this is S. Frederick Starr's Lost Enlightenment. This is a surprise because I didn't know of this book's existence. I was literally walking through Barnes & Noble, which I almost never do. I saw it. I was immediately interested in what it was, and decided to take it home right there and read it. So that story alone is somewhat of a surprise, because I don't usually buy things straight up at full price from Barnes & Noble, but I really couldn't resist it, and I was so glad that I didn't, because this book is great. It's full of wonderfully useful information for those who are interested in Central Asia. I think that there's really few books that compete with how much information there is about Central Asia, and then also Central Asia's Enlightenment. I don't think that there are many books on that subject, or at least not many books that I've come across in English on that subject. And this one, I think, really does just such a fantastic job of opening the doors on that. It's written for somebody who is not an expert in that subject. It's written from the perspective of somebody who, as Starr puts it, I think is doing something that not a lot of books have done before. And so because of that, I think it's just a fantastic and wonderful resource on a topic that I think deserved a book like this. So that was a surprise for me. Another big and really great surprise was Matthew Lewis and the Monk. I made a reading vlog about this a while ago, but I was not expecting to like it as much as I did. I was worried that it was going to be boring, or that it was going to be slow, or that it wasn't going to have a certain bite to it, and it totally did. This book really did grab me by the throat from beginning to end. I thought it was wonderful, and it was flawed in a lot of very obvious ways. It was definitely the machinations of somebody who was young and didn't have a very practiced hand in writing a novel, but those were things that I actually liked about the book. I liked being able to see the authorial hand that made it. I enjoyed all of the ups and downs of the book, and I thought it was surprisingly engaging all throughout. And then there was a moment at the end. Actually, this is funny, because it was at a Barnes & Noble that I was reading this, the same trip that ended up I ended up getting this on, where I was sitting in the cafe reading it, and I was literally making some quite embarrassing exclamations as I was reading it, because I just couldn't believe how involved I was in the book by the end of it. So this was a big surprise for me, and a welcome surprise for me. And then finally, in terms of surprises, we've got Michelangelo's God's Architect by William E. Wallace. This was a surprise for me because I didn't know about it. John David, who has a wonderful booktube channel here on YouTube, mentioned it in a video, and for various reasons that I'll get into later in this video, I decided to read it. And what was so surprising about it wasn't just the fact that I hadn't heard of it before, or it wasn't just the fact that I thought it was great. It was the fact that it gave me an appreciation of Michelangelo that I never thought I would have. I always knew about Michelangelo, and I always liked Michelangelo, and I had no problem with Michelangelo, but this book actually made me fall in love with Michelangelo as an artist and even as a person. I don't know. I was totally blown away by the personality that came out in these pages, and I know that William E. Wallace is an authority on the subject, so I am trusting him here. I haven't done, thousands of hours of research into Michelangelo's character, and I haven't read his letters, although there is a Penguin Classic volume of his letters, which I would be interested in reading. He was definitely temperamental, and there was obviously real character flaws to the guy, but what was utterly fascinating about this book was the fact that, as it says in the subtitle, it's a story of his final years, and Michelangelo experienced no decline. He was an artist who was an unimaginable genius from beginning to the end of his life. And there wasn't a moment in his career, like so many artists experience, where he started to experience a decline, where he started to fall out of favor, where he started to, his powers started to weaken. He was a artistic phenom from beginning to end, was doing things that nobody else could do from beginning to end, and he might have, as Wallace suggests in this book, even have reached the pinnacle of his artistic powers and achievements at the end of his life. Rather than experiencing a decline, he might have even been getting stronger and stronger and stronger throughout his life and his artistic career. And I think that's absolutely fascinating. It is not something that many artists are spared from. Many artists experience that decline. They are not spared from that. And Michelangelo, it seems like he was. And I thought that was just incredible. It made for some incredible reading. So that was a big surprise for me this year. Number 3 is, what are your favorite reads of this year? Pretty obvious question, and again, in no particular order, we've got Edmund Goss's Father and Son. I've talked about this before, but this book has immediately a special place in my heart because of the topics that it covers. It's really a right place, right time kind of thing for me to read. I thought it was funny. I thought it was heartfelt. I thought that the conclusions that it reaches at the end are brilliant. I honestly wish it was twice as long. I thought that this was a great, great book. I made a whole video about it. Spare yourself, actually, from watching that. It's a 40-minute video of me just, like, talking nonsense. But it's a book about the clash between religion and faith and reason, about generations coming together, different temperaments, as he talks about in that subtitle, coming together. And if any of that sounds interesting to you, it's also a story of what the world looked like right when Darwin was publishing his theory of evolution, and how that affected the world on a very personal level. It affected one family even. And I thought that was brilliant. This is a favorite of mine from this year. I was also a huge fan of Marion Turner's biography of Chaucer. I also talked about this last month. I thought that it was incredible. I thought that this biography, she did such a wonderful job of talking about Chaucer's life, but also just what the medieval world was like at the time of Chaucer's life, which was fascinating, and it was a wonderful window into that life. She talks about so many different aspects of what it was like to be a medieval person and to live a European life, as she says here in the subtitle. I had a fantastic time reading this book. I learned a ton, and it was just wonderful reading a biography that not only gave me a bunch of information about the person in the biography, but also situated that person in the context of the world that they lived in. And I always love it when biographies do that, and Marion Turner did a fantastic job of that with this book. And then we've got The Flamingo Smile by Stephen Jay Gould, Reflections in a Natural History. This book was everything I wanted it to be and more. And the only thing that bugs me about Stephen Jay Gould is that I have now a bunch of his books, but I always just want to reread him. I don't even want to read more of him. Of course I want to read more of him, but I want to reread him as well. Every time I go back to this, and I do, I just want to fall all back into it completely and just reread the whole thing. So it's going to be difficult to continue to read him, but I'm going to be putting him on every single month going forward because I just have to, because this book is great, and he's a person who writes about evolution and biology and natural history, and he really does it with a voice that I absolutely love to read, and a compassion and a passion that I think is totally engaging. So that is one of my favorite reads from this year. Number 4 is the flip side of that. What are some of your biggest disappointments of the year? So we don't need to give much of a preamble to The Agony and the Ecstasy by Irving Stone. I made a reading vlog about this, and I think it was my first ever reading vlog. I made it my first ever reading vlog because I just assumed I was going to love this. I just assumed that a biographical novel about Michelangelo was going to be great. And, you know, many people think that it is. Many people like this book. Many people think that Irving Stone is a great writer. I think those people are wrong, and I disagree, but at least when it comes to this book. But nevertheless, everyone is entitled to their own opinion. I hated it from beginning to end. I read the entire thing. I didn't DNF it. I stuck it out through the whole thing. I thought that Michelangelo as a character fell completely flat. He was one note throughout the entire thing. Every single character in this book was one note, fell flat for me completely. There was not a single aspect of this book that I thought did justice to Michelangelo's life or his artistic career or his abilities as an artist or his achievements or anything. And I thought it sucked. So that's my unmitigated opinion on this. But going beyond that, I also had to unfortunately include this book, They Flew, A History of the Impossible by Carlos Ayer. This book was a massive disappointment, and I read it before I started a booktube channel. I read it right at the beginning of the year. I had asked for it for Christmas, and I got it for Christmas, and it was the first thing that I had read in this year. And I had read it because I was such a huge fan of Carlos Ayer's Reformations, which I think is an incredible book and a wonderful book to get you interested in the subject if you are looking for an opening into the Reformation. They Flew was, I think, at the time, his most recent publication, so I was just interested in seeing what this book was about, a history of the impossible. I liked the cover, liked the Reformations. It's also put out by Yale. I thought that Carlos Ayer might have had some interesting things to say about miracles within Christianity and miracles within Catholicism specifically. The reports of people flying, for example. But he didn't, because he actually spent this book trying to convince you, or at least doing everything to suggest that there might be a possibility that these miracles actually happened, that they took place, and that's ludicrous. It's just nonsense. They didn't. And the suggestion that St. Teresa of Avila flew around the monastery that she was in is nonsense. It obviously never happened, and I was disappointed at page after page after page that Carlos Ayer was suggesting that there might have been a possibility that such a thing did happen. And then I watched even a maddening interview with him where that suggestion was not just repeated, but even he doubled down on it and was even more explicit about it in that interview. And so in his mind, these events actually did happen, that these events, because you can't explain them away in his mind, well, then we should entertain the notion that they actually did happen. Now, I could go into a long rant about this, and in fact, I did in some capacity, and I don't want to continue to do that, at least in this venue. But to me, reading an entire book where somebody was taking accounts of obviously impossible things happening and then saying, well, I don't know, can you explain that? Why would people say that? Was extremely annoying. And he says at the beginning of this book that he knows that this book is going to be annoying to some people. I am one of those people. I don't like it when somebody says, well, you can't explain this away, so it might have happened. And it's like, no, nobody, people can't fly. I can't fly. Can you fly? No, none of us can fly. We can't meet anybody who can fly. It's ridiculous. It's nonsense. Anyway, that was a massive disappointment for me. And then number 5 is the last question. What books are you looking forward to reading? So for the rest of the year, what books are you looking forward the most to reading? And I could obviously put, I don't know, hundreds of books on this, but I narrowed it down to a list of books that are very me. So I'm not sure that they're going to be on anyone else's list, but these are all physical copies that I have in front of me. I limited myself to that. We've got The Dissolution of the Monasteries by James G. Clarke. I have not read a book entirely devoted to this subject. I have, as I mentioned before, with the Reformation's Carlos Ayer, which, by the way, is still a great book, regardless of whatever anything else Carlos Ayer wrote. It's still a fantastic book. But the topic of the dissolution of the monasteries has been something that's come up again and again and again in my reading of the Reformation, and I absolutely find that to be the most interesting thing that I read in every book about the Reformation that I read. So to read a book devoted entirely to that subject is fantastic. I don't know what to expect from this in terms of, I don't know, some sort of literary angle. I don't know if it's going to be, the most eloquent book ever written on the subject, but I'm extremely happy to find a book and to read a book entirely devoted to that subject of the dissolution of the monasteries under King Henry VIII. So that's that. There's also this book, also slightly related to the Reformation. It's Global Crisis by Jeffrey Parker. War, Climate Change, and Catastrophe in the 19th Century. I'm so interested in reading this. I've had it on my shelf since Christmas because this is another book that I got at Christmas that I asked for, and there's so much to say about the 17th century that I've read about, but I've never read a book directly addressing all of these individual calamities that befall Europe during the 17th century. I mean, when you're reading about the 30 Years' War, when you're reading about the climate change that he references here, when you're reading about all sorts of conflicts that are ripping Europe apart during the 17th century, it really does feel like a catastrophe. It feels like a crisis. And when I discovered that there was a book written entirely on that subject, it got me very excited because I had that, sensation when I was reading about it, but it was none of the things that I was reading about it directly addressed it. So this book looks like it does, and so because of that, I'm very excited to read it. We have probably the book I'm the most excited to read, honestly. This is To the Success of Our Hopeless Cause by Benjamin Nathans. It's been a while since I've read a piece of Soviet history. And by a while, I mean probably 2 months, but that's 2 months too many. So this is a book that I had been looking forward to for a very long time. When I saw that it was coming out, I ordered it on my recent massive order from Princeton University Press on their 50% off sale. It will be the first book that I read from that sale. This book, I took a break before I really dove into a lot of nonfiction to read just fiction. But next month, this is going to be on the pile for sure. And I'm very, very much looking forward to reading it. And then finally, we've got The Huxleys by Alison Bashford. This is a biography of a family. And I love the idea of that. I haven't really read biographies. Actually, no, that's not true. I've read a couple dual biographies, Fatal Discord being one of them. But this is a biography of a family, and I think that's fascinating. The subtitle here is An Intimate Life of Evolution. Obviously, the most famous Huxley would be the Huxley that wrote A Brave New World. The one that I'm the most interested in reading about is Thomas Henry Huxley, the Huxley that, what did they call him? They called him like Darwin's, what did they call him? They called him some sort of Darwin's bulldog. I think they called him Darwin's bulldog. But the Thomas Henry Huxley being the one who's most closely associated with Darwin and evolutionary theory, and it was a big vocal proponent of it and a champion of it, and even had a contentious relationship with people like Edmund Goss's father, so Philip Goss. So anyway, big fan of what this book seems to be about, and I'm very excited to read it. I'm hoping that it is as good as I think it will be. And that's it. Those are my 5 questions. So I'll put them in the description. If you want to do them on your own, feel free to do that either in the comments of this video or do it on your YouTube channel or start a YouTube channel if you want to do it. But yeah, those are the 5 questions. I've got the book giveaway going strong. A ton of people wanted the Secret History, which was great. Somebody also snagged Ken Follett's book as well. So the giveaway continues and it's going strong. Let me know if you want either of the 2 books that are on offer today. And that'll be it for me today. Thank you, BookTube.